God keep our land glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Amen. Let the doors be open, que l'on ouvre les portes. Déclaration de député. L'honorable député de Richmond.
The Honourable Member for Richmond Athabasca. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to congratulate an exceptional group of young women and their coaches for their spectacular victory at the final of the Canadian U Sports Women's Rugby Championship. They won thanks to their incredibly hard work and determination. The players of the Rouge and Or team managed to win the championship for a second year in a row and for the third time in the last 4 years. Also, Laval University is the only Francophone university that has received this national title. It also has the record for the biggest crowd for a women's sporting event in Quebec. In conclusion, I would quote the player Corinne Fréchette, who is a star player from the championship. She said, "It's more than just a game or a medal. It represents everyone who has worn the jersey before and who have ensured that the sport will thrive. We have made history in women's sports. Young girls will want to wear our colors. Congratulations. You are real role models."
The Honourable Member from Brampton Centre.
Mr. Speaker, according to the UN report, since the conflict began, over 1,400 innocent Israelis and more than 10,000 innocent Palestinians, including 4,000 children and more than 2,500 women, lost their lives. The killing of innocent civilians is heartbreaking and painful. The whole population in Gaza is under siege. Access to food, water, electricity, and medicine is being severely restricted. 1.5 million Palestinians are internally displaced. 14 of 35 hospitals have stopped functioning. On Friday, the Prime Minister said, quote, "We have seen too much horror these last weeks. Kids are being killed, and we all want it to stop," end quote. Many Canadians are demanding that we call for an immediate ceasefire, an end to hostilities, freeing of hostages, and full respect of international and humanitarian law. I have heard them, and I will keep listening.
The Honourable Member from Calgary-Mindapore.
As Remembrance Day approaches, I think of family members who sacrificed so that we may live in peace. I think of my father's uncle, John Schramm, who served in the Navy. Great-uncles Gordon Schramm and Eddie Hanowski served in the Army. Eddie was severely injured in Holland. On my mother's side, I remember great-uncle Ronald L'Italien, who paid the ultimate price for his service to Canada. These sacrifices are remembered by generations, from my parents to me to my son, who wrote this poem. Today, as I awake, the war takes place. No breaks are there where the war takes place. They fought together where the war takes place. The poppies grew as fast as the flash where the war took place. They had to choose between their country or their family where the war takes place. The soldier is a lion when he is on the battlefield where the war takes place. They all go home when the war takes place. May we never forget.
You're here.
L'honorable député de Notre-Dame-de-Grâce, Westmount.
Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to pay tribute to an exceptional Montreal photographer, Brian Merritt. He passed away on September 21st.
Mr. Merritt became an activist and leader in the preservation of architectural heritage of Montreal. Through his works and the publication of several books, he recorded and fought to protect the fabric of Montreal at a time of tremendous change and urban development. He challenged infrastructure projects that threatened historic buildings, saving, among others, Windsor Station. His work played a crucial role in the restoration of Shaughnessy House, now integrated into the Canadian Centre for Architecture. De même, la contribution de...
He also made contributions to the Montreal Museum of Fine Arts, which holds many of his photographs. He also contributed to other private and public museums like the McCord Stewart, the Quebec City Museum of Fine Arts, and the National Arts Gallery not far from here. Let's all take a moment to honor his legacy and the indelible mark he left on our beautiful city of Montreal.
L'honorable député de Laurentides-Labelle.
The honorable member for Laurentides-Labelle. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Everything started on March 9th, 1933, in Saint-Agat's Town Hall. That was when the Saint-Agathe Chamber of Commerce was born. It wanted to be a voice for commercial interests in the region. Its first success was to establish a counter for the Liquor Commission. Then there were other initiatives like the Carnival, finishing former Route 11. Businesses like J.L. Brissette, MQ Windows, and successful startups like Origine Nature, La Manufacture, or La Veillée. In all these cases, the Chamber of Commerce worked very hard to develop this region that has so much potential. Today, it is a hub for services and activities, and it also supports SMEs. Congratulations on your 90th anniversary.
L'honorable député d'Orléans.
The honorable member for Orléans. Mr. Speaker, November is Hindu Heritage Month. I would like to thank the Hindu community of Orleans and the entire country for their contributions to our society. I was very pleased to attend Diwali events on the Hill this week.
Very excited to welcome in this house 90 students from 4 civic classes of Corrine Wilson Secondary School in Orléans. Merci à leurs enseignants.
I'd like to thank their teachers, Malia Robin, Felicia Persuade, Paul Emerson, and Marlene McRae for having organized the visit.
Finally, this week is Veterans Week, which will conclude with Remembrance Day on November 11. Several celebrations across our country will take place honoring those who fought and lost their lives for our freedom, for our liberty. To all the veterans and acting members of the force in Orléans, Canada, and abroad, I say thank you for your service. Lest we forget.
The honourable member from Haliburton, Kawartha Lakes, Rock.
Thank you, Speaker. Throughout the history of Canada, Indigenous peoples have served with honour and distinction in the armed forces. They have defended our nation, protected our shared values, and demonstrated unwavering courage and resilience in the face of danger. In World War I, their bravery and contributions in battles like Vimy Ridge and Passchendaele were instrumental in the Allied victory. In World War II, Indigenous peoples once again stepped up to defend freedom and democracy. During the Korean War and subsequent international conflicts, Indigenous peoples continued to serve, making heroic contributions to Canada's peacekeeping efforts around the world. As we remember those who fought and those who made the ultimate sacrifice, we must also remember the often overlooked stories of Indigenous veterans who returned home to face continued challenges and discrimination. On November 8th, let us recommit ourselves to the principles of justice, equality, and reconciliation. Let us strive to ensure that Indigenous veterans who have served and continue to serve receive the recognition, respect, and support they deserve. Lest we forget.
The honourable member from Ottawa South.
Mr. Speaker, the 2332 Major E.J.G. Holland VC Royal Canadian Army Cadet Corps was founded on November 25th, 1948. They will celebrate their 75th anniversary this month with a ceremonial parade. 80 cadets, strong with a dedicated team of officers and civilian volunteers, this unit has volunteered with the Royal Canadian Legion Poppy Campaign, the Army Run, Christmas toy drives, the Boots on the Ground Walk, and many other community events. Cadets build life skills such as leadership, teamwork, resilience, and discipline. This valuable experience has positively impacted countless youth throughout our community. Congratulations to the 2332 Royal Canadian Army Cadets on your 75th anniversary. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Brampton North.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to mark the second annual Hindu Heritage Month and in celebration of Diwali. During this month, I'd like to recognize and honor the countless contributions of the Hindu community to our nation. Over the past 120 years, they have been an integral part of Canadian society. Hindu communities have flourished and grown immensely, leaving their mark on several aspects of Canadian society, from medicine and cutting-edge technology to arts and thriving businesses. Mr. Speaker, this weekend I'll also be celebrating Diwali with the Hindu community in Brampton. The Festival of Lights marks the victory of light over darkness, knowledge over ignorance, and good over evil. It is a time for families and friends to come together, share joy, and express their gratitude for the blessings in their lives. During this special month, I encourage all Canadians to take the time to learn more about the Hindu culture and the significance of Diwali, to engage with our Hindu friends and neighbours, and to join in on the festivities. Let us embrace the opportunity to foster understanding, respect, and appreciation for the rich traditions that define our nation. Thank you.
The honourable member from Banff Airdrie.
As we approach Remembrance Day, it is important to remember and recognize the sacrifice that so many Canadians made for our freedoms. The toll of war weighs heavily upon our veterans, and so it is our duty to honour their sacred contribution and ensure they are cared for. Yet this Prime Minister has told them that they are asking for more than he can give, and after 8 years we are seeing veterans suffering in record numbers. We need to recognize that veterans, particularly those with injuries, are vulnerable to the cost of living crisis brought on by this government. The Veterans Food Bank in Calgary reports that the demand for their services has doubled, and they expect their shelves to be empty by the end of the week. Veterans are suffering right now, with more and more using food banks and homeless shelters. And now the cost of living crisis has gotten so bad that there are serving members of the Canadian Armed Forces who are living in their cars because they can't afford a place to live. This Prime Minister is just not worth the cost. It's time to bring home a government that will honour the service and sacrifice of our veterans, not just on Remembrance Week, but every single day.
The honourable member from Niagara Centre.
Mr. Speaker, I'm honoured to rise today on Indigenous Veterans Day to express my gratitude and to celebrate the Indigenous veterans who have served in the Canadian Armed Forces in Canada and across the world. The service of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples to our country in times of conflict, war, and peace goes back generations. It is up to all of us to ensure that their sacrifices are never forgotten and that their contributions are fully appreciated. It is essential to acknowledge that many Indigenous veterans faced unique challenges and discrimination during and after their service. Despite these challenges, they persevered, showcasing their remarkable resilience and determination. On this Indigenous Veterans Day, let us all remember and pay our heartfelt tribute to these individuals who have stood at the forefront of our nation's defense and exemplify, Mr. Speaker, the true meaning of service and sacrifice, lest we forget.
L'honorable député de Montmagny-Lillet,
The honourable member from Montmagny-Lillet, Kamouraska, Rivière-du-Loup. Mr. Speaker, after 8 years of this Prime Minister, he's trying everything to save his career. Luckily for him, he's found a new friend, this centralising Bloc Québécois. On Monday, we voted on a common sense motion, which would have enabled everyone to benefit from a pause on the carbon tax on home heating, not just for 3% of the population, but for all Canadians. Unlike what the Minister of Rural Affairs told us. But the Liberals voted against the motion, and the Bloc too. If you vote for the Bloc, you'll pay a steep price, because they want to radically increase the carbon tax. This new, costly Bloc Liberal coalition will hurt everyone, including in Quebec. And that's not just my opinion. The Parliamentary Budget Officer has said that the second carbon tax will add 20 cents per litre of gas. Our proposal is clear. No artifice, no temporary measures. We need to axe inflationary taxes and bring back common sense to Quebec. That's just common sense, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Medicine Hat, Cardston, Warner.
Mr. Speaker, after 8 years of this Prime Minister, he's just not worth the cost. Canada is broken, and households and businesses across this country are struggling to hold on, losing hope that things will ever get better. The PM decided to pause the carbon tax on home heating oil for only 3% of Canadians. His divisive policies have left Western Canadians out in the cold, having to decide between eating and heating. The Economic Development Minister thinks Westerners should just elect more Liberals if they want to afford home heating. Well, Mr. Speaker, surprisingly, Albertans in Edmonton Centre and Calgary Skyview did vote Liberal. However, their MPs didn't even try to get Albertans the same breaks as other Canadians. In fact, on Monday, these same two MPs voted against our Conservative motion to axe home heating, or a carbon tax on home heating. It is now clear, now more than ever, Canada needs a common-sense Conservative government to start fixing the problems created by the NDP Liberal Carbon Tax Coalition.
The honourable member from Waterloo.
Mr. Speaker, for the last 32 days, I, along with colleagues from Kitchener-Conestoga, Kitchener-South Hespeler, and Cambridge, have been listening to and consoling residents in the Waterloo region for the deaths of thousands of innocent Israelis and Palestinians. We feel their pain, their grief, and bring their calls to action to this chamber. Mr. Speaker, there are parents having to explain to their kids why they are seeing death and horror in their social media feeds. We have children afraid to wear religious symbols, neighbors grieving the loss of loved ones, faith leaders fearing for the safety of congregations, and people feeling silenced from publicizing their views. Mr. Speaker, we hear the range of calls from Canadians, including for a humanitarian ceasefire, the release of civilian hostages, the safe return of all Canadians, a dedicated humanitarian corridor. We must continue working hard to achieve a just and lasting peace for all Palestinians and Israelis for the sake of humanity. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
L'honorable député de Victoria.
Mr. Speaker, we cannot turn away from the humanitarian crisis unfolding. In Gaza, there are over 50,000 pregnant women without access to medical care. Over 100 women give birth every single day amidst the chaos. New Democrats from the beginning have called for a ceasefire, condemned Hamas's violence, and called for a release of all hostages. And now, as people who have nothing to do with Hamas's violence are being killed, we must center human rights, international law, and human decency. C-sections are being performed without anesthetic. Imagine being pregnant with no medicine, no food, no water, no electricity. Women are miscarrying. Mothers and babies are dying daily amidst bombings and attacks. 4,000 children have been killed since the start of this siege. 4,000 kids. Mr. Speaker, how many more babies have to die before this government will call for a ceasefire?
Hear, hear.
Hear, hear.
L'honorable député de...
The honourable member for Trois-Rivières. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Traversier Day Centre and Peer Mental Support Centre in Trois-Rivières is celebrating its 35th anniversary this year. Its mission is to help people who are living with a mental health issue and help them in improving their quality of life. In order to better meet clients' growing needs, the organization has started an innovative new project, which will enable it to broaden its services and help more people. A mobile response team. This team will be able to meet people living with mental health issues and meet them closer to where they live. The vehicle is completely autonomous and has been designed to hold consultations. It can even host small groups for activities. I would like to congratulate Director General Shahnaz Moussa on her exceptional work, as well as the chairwoman of the board, Isabelle Fortin. They have brought together the entire team behind this project. I'd like to congratulate the entire team on this excellent initiative.
The honourable member from Chatham-Kent, Leamington.
Mr. Speaker, after 8 years, Canadians are seeing this Liberal NDP government for what it is. This Prime Minister is just not worth the cost. He continues to divide Canadians, now over the carbon tax. But he still plans to quadruple the tax on home heating, on gas, on groceries for 97% of Canadians. But he decided to pause the tax for 3% of families in areas where he was plummeting in the polls and where his Liberal MPs were revolting. The Liberal Rural Affairs Minister said if people in other regions wanted to have the same pause, elect more Liberals. Is that politics or is that policy? But the people in Thunder Bay, Superior North did elect a Liberal MP, and yet her constituents are not getting the pause. Why didn't she use her influence with this Prime Minister to bring relief to her constituents? And why didn't the Prime Minister allow this MP from Thunder Bay, Superior North to freely vote to take the tax off the heat and keep the heat on her constituents?
L'honorable député de Lac-Saint-Louis.
Public policy is a science and an art that relies on both rigorous analysis and an acute sense of the possible. Today, graduate students from McGill's Max Bell School of Public Policy are on Parliament Hill to learn firsthand about government decision-making in a Westminster parliamentary system. They are accompanied by the program's founding director, Professor Christopher Reagan, one of Canada's most respected and influential economists. Through Professor Reagan's leadership, the Max Bell program has brought together academics and public policy practitioners in a full range of subject areas to create one of the country's leading faculties of public administration. I ask members to join me in welcoming Max Bell students to the nation's capital today. Government necessarily plays a crucial role in our complex and rapidly evolving world. We look forward to these bright young minds taking up important roles and responsibilities for guiding our ship of state into a promising future.
Hear, 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 hear. That's a statement.
Oral questions, questions orales. L'honorable chef.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. The Bloc, they're not worth the cost. The Bloc Québécois voted in favour of increasing taxes on home heating throughout Canada, and they did so to save this Prime Minister's political career. So this is a new costly coalition made up of the Bloc and the Liberal Party, and the Minister of the Environment has confirmed that this is a coalition. He says there is a coalition in the House of Commons and that coalition includes the Bloc. The Bloc doesn't do anything for free, though. So will the Prime Minister tell us what he offered the Bloc Québécois so that they would keep him in power and support quadrupling the carbon tax? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. I offer to Quebecers what I offer all Canadians, that is, the opportunity to grow in a greener, more prosperous future. Together, we are fighting climate change. There are three parties in this House of Commons fighting climate change. The Conservatives, though, they don't want to do anything to address climate change. The Conservatives don't understand that there can't be a plan for the economy if there isn't a plan to fight climate change. They go hand in hand, and we will work with all members in this House who want to fight against climate change to build a better world. Meanwhile, the Conservatives want to set us back to the Stone Age. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. Mr. Speaker, he has just mixed up the Bloc Québécois and Quebecers. Those are not one and the same, because the Bloc Québécois has abandoned Quebecers. But the Prime Minister apparently thinks that the Bloc Québécois speaks for Quebecers. The Bloc Québécois wants to radically increase taxes on Quebecers, and the Bloc Québécois now wants to keep this Prime Minister in power. The Bloc Québécois supports the Prime Minister's inflationary deficits and his centralizing policies. So, the Minister for the Environment also admitted that there is a coalition which includes the Bloc. So, once again, what did the Prime Minister offer the Bloc to get this coalition deal? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, approximately 500,000 Quebecers are still heating their homes with heating oil. All Quebec MPs should know, and that includes Bloc members, the Liberal Party members, and other. We should all understand that those who are spending money on home heating oil are spending more money, they're polluting more, and this mostly affects lower-income Quebecers and Canadians. That's why we are offering to replace home heating oil with heat pumps. We'll work with all provinces who want to deliver this program to people free of charge, especially for those living on lower incomes, because we know that to build a better world, we need to do so together.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Prime Minister is not worth the cost or the division after 8 years. Panicking under pressure from MPs in a region where he's plummeting in the polls, he'd paused the tax for some people in some places, but his minister said that other people should have voted Liberal if they wanted the same break. Now the panicking Prime Minister is further dividing the country with the confirmation from his Environment Minister that he's now in a coalition with the Bloc, the Separatist Party. So we have a costly carbon tax coalition that includes the Separatists. What did he promise the Separatists to get them to sign on to keeping him in power for 2 more years?
Le très honorable Premier ministre.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Only division in this country as to whether or not we should be doing everything we can to fight climate change is within the Conservative Party. The Canadians are unequivocal that we need to fight climate change and we need to support Canadians through that. That's why our price on pollution returns hundreds of dollars every 3 months to the average family of 4 while fighting climate change and watching our curve bend faster over the past 2 years than the other G7 countries. We will continue to hold Canadians together as we fight climate change while Conservatives continue to bring us backwards.
Hear, hear.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister's own Environment Commissioner confirmed he will not hit his own targets, and the Prime Minister has admitted that his carbon tax is not worth the cost for oil-heated homes. Now, he did that to save his political hide, but his desperation went one step further this week when he relied on the Separatists to vote with him to quadruple the tax on home heating for everyone else in Canada. So the question is very clear. What did he promise the Separatists to get their support to save his political hide and quadruple his tax?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, no matter how much the Conservatives try to deny it, every single day in this country we get closer to never using coal to generate electricity again. And now, Mr. Speaker, we're choosing to phase out home heating oil, which is dirtier, more expensive, and disproportionately relied on by lower-income Canadians. The Conservatives may try to make up all the stuff they like, but the reality is replacing home heating oil is good for Canadians when we put in heat pumps, and that's exactly what we're doing.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, after 8 years, he hasn't eliminated coal-fired electricity. He hasn't eliminated oil-powered heating in homes, and his carbon tax will not allow him to meet his own GHG targets, according to his Environment Commissioner. Now, that is the reality, that his carbon tax is not worth the cost. And that's why people, all 10 premiers, Conservative, Liberal, and NDP, are calling for him to take the tax off so Canadians will keep the heat on. Will he be fair to all Canadians, or will he sign on with the Separatists to divide our country some more?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
I have to admit I'm a little worried for the Leader of the Opposition. When he has to stoop to bringing up the separatist boogeyman to try and scare Canadians, he must be running out of material. The fact of the matter is, Mr. Speaker, Canadians are afraid of climate change. They're afraid of the extreme weather events. They're afraid of the concerns we have about a brighter future. And what we are doing is fighting climate change every day while we build a stronger economy with greater careers, while we support Canadians every single day with the high costs of living. This is what we're delivering. He has no plan to fight climate change, no plan for the future of the economy, no plan for Canadians.
Colleagues, I'm going to ask colleagues to all honourable colleagues to please refrain from taking or making noises while a member or one of our colleagues has the floor. It's important for us to hear the questions. It's important for us to hear the answers.
The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Mr. Speaker, this morning, the Prime Minister repeated the government's stance regarding asking Israel for a ceasefire in the Gaza Strip. And this stance has been called for many countries and organizations across the world. But Prime Minister Netanyahu is not listening to repeated calls for a ceasefire, even Anthony Blinken's calls. So Israel's attitude is truly deplorable. Would the Prime Minister agree that it's time to call for a ceasefire? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, we are asking for a humanitarian pause. That would help get the hostages out of Israel, out of the Gaza Strip, as well as others who are citizens of other countries out of Gaza. And it would also allow for humanitarian aid to get to Gaza. We need, in order to get humanitarian help, to support that. We need to support a two-state solution. We need to put an end to all this conflict, because the images we're seeing on TV every night are heartbreaking to Canadians and to everyone in the world. And we need to continue to work for the peace and security of all. The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Well, I regret to observe that the State of Israel, in fact, has broken the trust that the international community had in them. The international community trusted them to act reasonably toward the people of Gaza. Thousands of people have died needlessly. Israel is occupying Gaza, but it's gone on for a long time. So there needs to be a strong action by the international community. The international community needs to take action to request a ceasefire for international peace. The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, as we all know, we are working with our partners around the world in order to protect civilians. We are working to restore peace and safety for all people of the region, and we will continue to work towards that. But as parliamentarians and as Canadians, Mr. Speaker, we need to be very worried about the divisiveness and hatred and fear-mongering that we're seeing in some parts of in Canada. We need to stand up to Islamophobia. We need to stand up to anti-Semitism. We need to stand up to all forms of hatred, because we need to remember who we are as Canadians. The Honourable Member for Burnaby South.
The Liberal and Conservative corporate coalition may strike again today. We put forward a plan to help Canadians with their home heating bill, to help Canadians tackle the climate crisis and make big oil and gas pay for it. Now, environmental organizations are on board, but climate delay liberals and climate deny conservatives will back the profits of big oil again. So how can the Prime Minister and the leader of the Conservative Party justify voting against this?
Hear, hear. The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, it was with confusion and consternation that I noted the way the NDP voted with the Conservatives against one of the most successful measures Canada has ever seen in the fight against climate change. Putting a price on pollution is exactly how we've managed to bend the curve on our emissions faster than other G7 countries over the past 2 years. How we are moving forward with global leadership on the fight against climate change. Seeing the NDP vote with the Conservatives against a price on pollution is something that has disappointed millions of progressives across this country.
Colleagues, I'm going to ask you please to exercise great restraint. I especially asked a colleague from York Simcoe to allow other members to please when they have the floor, to hold the floor until it is that colleague's turn to speak.
The Honourable Member for Burnaby South.
Mr. has literally missed every single target he set on emissions. Voici notre plan.
Here is our plan. We want to make heating bills less expensive for all Canadians. We want to fight climate change, and we want big oil to pay more. Many organizations that work for the environment agree with this, but the Liberal Conservative CEO coalition will continue to protect big oil. How can the Prime Minister vote against our plan? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, I know there are progressives across Canada who were deeply disappointed to see the NDP vote with the Conservatives against our most successful climate change fighting measure, the most successful one in the history of Canada, and that is carbon pricing, putting a price on pollution across Canada. We are fighting climate change. This measure fights climate change. This measure helps us invest in renewable energy, and it also helps us put more money in the pockets of 8 of 10 families in provinces where carbon pricing applies. We will continue to fight climate change, and we hope the NDP will join us once again. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Most tragic and heartbreaking to see these two squabbling in this way. The Prime Minister was so disappointed in the NDP leader's flip-flop on carbon tax for heat, but the good news for the Prime Minister is the NDP leader has flip-flopped on his flip-flop and now supports the Prime Minister's plan to quadruple the tax. This, with 2 million Canadians, a record-smashing number going to a food bank. Will the Prime Minister create another carve-out on the carbon tax for farmers so that Canadians can afford to eat?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
We know, Mr. Speaker, that farmers are always focused on being good stewards of the land, and we are working with them in investing, in supporting them in many different ways to ensure that we can continue to put good quality, affordable food on people's tables right across the country, and that's what we're going to continue to do, Mr. Speaker. Farmers and indeed Canadians from coast to coast to coast know that as we fight climate change, as we put more money in people's pockets every 3 months with hundreds of dollars with the pollution price return, we're going to continue to step up in building a strong economy for tomorrow, something the Conservatives simply don't understand.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister is quadrupling his carbon tax on the farmers who make the food, quadrupling the tax on the truckers who ship the food, therefore quadrupling the tax on all who buy the food. Good news is there is a common sense Conservative bill that's passed through the House and in the Senate where the Prime Minister's senators are holding it up. Will the Prime Minister once again cave and allow another carve-out on the carbon tax for farmers? Yes or no?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Many people living in rural areas across the country, including many farmers, continue to be stuck heating their homes with home heating oil. It is dirtier, it is more expensive, and it is something that is expensive to replace. That is why, Mr. Speaker, we are stepping up with measures that are going to deliver heat pumps to families right across the country, the 1.2 million households across this country, in every part of this country, relying on home heating oil, so we can help them fight climate change and save money at the same time. That's our plan. The Conservatives have no plan.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Our common sense plan is found in Bill C-234, which would give another carve-out to farmers on the carbon tax. And the Prime Minister has claimed that he won't cave again. He says there will be no more carve-outs. We're asking him to keep in mind there are 2 million people who have to go to the food bank every month because of his policies. Will he put his ego and pride aside and ask his Liberal senators to pass Common Sense Bill C-324 to axe the tax and create a carbon tax carve-out for our farmers?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, farmers across this country know the costs of climate change. They know the costs of extreme weather events, whether it be floods or fires or more intense storms. Farmers are worried about their future, worried about their kids' future, worried about the country's future. That's why we put forward a plan that is reducing our emissions and growing our economy at the same time while putting more money in Canadians' pockets. The Conservatives have no plan to fight climate change, no plan for the future of the economy, no plan for future generations. We will continue to do what's necessary to support Canadians, including farmers, long into the future.
That's it. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
The Prime Minister won't answer a simple question. It's about the common sense Conservative bill to carve out farming from the carbon tax. But I understand why he feels he's in a bind, because his Environment Minister said, as long as I am Environment Minister, there will be no more exceptions to carbon pricing. That implies that he would resign if there was another carve-out. Will the Prime Minister sacrifice his crazy carbon tax minister and support our common sense bill to take the tax off?
If I could,
it's a crazy carbon tax.
The colleagues, all colleagues should know that we cannot use language which calls into question the character of honourable members, individual members. I hear an explanation from the Leader of the Opposition, and I will repeat that so that we can clarify the record. The Leader of the Opposition made a correction saying that he was referring to the policy and not the person. So, but that's certain. And I thank the Honourable Leader of the Opposition for making that clarification, because otherwise that language would clearly be unparliamentary. The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I think we'll all be waiting for a long list of corrections and factual errors from the Leader of the official opposition if we go down this road. The fact of the matter, Mr. Speaker, for millions of Canadians who understand that climate change poses an existential threat to our country, to our well-being, to our economy, they need action. They expect a government with a plan. They expect a government to deliver on that plan, and that is exactly what we have been doing for 8 years. Meanwhile, the only plan the Conservatives put forward are cuts to services, cuts to program, cuts to rebates for Canadians, and yes, cuts to the most successful measure to reduce climate change emissions that this country has ever seen. When is he going to come forward with a real plan?
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
It is crazy to quadruple the carbon tax on our farmers when 2 million people are going to a food bank every month. So now the Minister of the Environment has threatened to resign if there are new carbon tax carve-outs. We have a common sense Conservative bill that would carve out the carbon tax for farmers. All it needs is for the Prime Minister to give his senators permission to pass it. Will the Prime Minister please just cave at least one more time and allow a carve-out on the carbon tax for our farmers, yes or no?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, I won't use the word crazy, but I will say it is deeply, deeply irresponsible for the Conservative Party of Canada to continue to deny that taking action against climate change is important, to continue to deny that climate change is a real threat to Canadians and to our economy. The fact is, Mr. Speaker, we have put forward measures that both fight climate change and put more money back in the pockets of 8 out of 10 Canadian families, and we're going to continue to fight climate change because the cost of inaction against climate change is far more than the cost of action.
Je m'excuse. L'honorable
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Tax isn't working. He's missed every single target. He's on track to miss his 2030 targets, and Canada is ranked 58th out of 63 on climate action. Mr. Speaker, the question is about our farmers. There's a bill C-234, a common sense conservative bill to carve out farmers from the carbon tax. All it needs is for the Prime Minister to give his senators permission to adopt this carve-out. Will the Prime Minister stand up to his Environment Minister and stand up for farmers and let Bill C-234 pass and allow this carve-out to go ahead?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
I will admit, it doesn't happen often, but every now and then I am a little bit envious of the position that the Leader of the Opposition finds himself in, of being able to criticize on the one hand that we aren't doing enough to fight climate change, and then on the other hand say that we need to stop everything we're doing to fight climate change. Fortunately, Mr. Speaker, Canadians are smarter than he takes them for. Canadians know the only way to build a strong economy for the future is to fight climate change at the same time. That is exactly what we are doing, and until he puts forward a plan that is responsible and real on fighting climate change and growing the economy, Canadians will continue to dismiss him.
That's right.
The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Mr. Speaker, the next few seconds will be very difficult. I'm going to quote Adil Sharkawi. Allah, deal with the people of Gaza and with Zionists. Exterminate people. Do not spare anyone. Mr. Speaker, does the Prime Minister feel that Sharkawi committed a crime under the criminal code by making that statement in public? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, those words are unacceptable and anti-Semitic. Those words spoken by a preacher are an insult to the lives and hope of millions of people across the world, including millions who lost their lives during the Holocaust because they were Jewish. We will always stand up to anti-Semitism. We will always be there to promote peace and compassion among peoples throughout the world. The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Mr. Speaker, 3 hours ahead of question period, I informed the Prime Minister that I would ask this question. So I want a clear, specific answer. The preacher who said that, are his words criminal? And should they be treated as a crime and punished as a crime? The government appointed someone to serve as a liaison between communities. Currently, Ms. El Gawabi. Do we need her, though?
Le très honorable Premier Ministre.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, it's true that there are people saying unacceptable things around the world and here in Canada, too. What we need to do in this place and throughout the country is to encourage people to listen, to be compassionate. We need to return to our basic values as Canadians. We need to have empathy and compassion for the suffering of our neighbours. Now, as for criminal prosecution and crimes, the police and relevant authorities will make those decisions, and I'm counting on them to make those decisions. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
A panicking Prime Minister is not worth the cost or the division after 8 years. He'd recently announced that he would pause his carbon tax on heat for some people in some places where he's plummeting the polls and his caucus is revolting. He claims this is not regional, but his own rural affairs minister said that if people on the prairies want the same pause, they should elect more Liberals. Can he confirm whether he endorses these comments or whether he condemns them.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Perhaps the Conservatives think that phasing out coal was divisive because some parts of the country had already phased out coal, and it only targeted the parts of the country that still rely on coal to generate electricity. Mr. Speaker, we are united in our desire to fight climate change as Canadians. We are united in our desire to support Canadians who need it through into a better future. That's why banning and phasing out home heating oil by replacing them with heat pumps right across the country is an approach that will unite Canadians. The only division is amongst Conservatives who still think that climate change is fake.
That's right.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Stating falsehoods about our position will not distract from the original question. Here is the question. The Minister of Rural Development said that if people in the prairies wanted a pause on the carbon tax for home heat, they should elect more Liberals. Does the Prime Minister denounce these comments, or does he agree with them?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, tens of thousands of people across the prairies are getting the chance to replace their home heating oil with with thermal pumps, with heat pumps, because we have put forward programs to help in that transition as we pause the price on pollution for people in the prairies who rely on home heating oil. Tens of thousands of them. We are there for people in the prairies who want to save thousands of dollars a year, who want to get heat pumps, who want to fight climate change. Why aren't the Conservatives there for those people?
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
We're there for all Canadians. But this is really troubling. We thought that perhaps it was a gaffe when his Liberal Rural Affairs Minister said that the prairies would have to elect more Liberals if they wanted a pause. And if it really is just a fair policy that applies evenly across the country, then why would you have to elect more of any particular party in your region to benefit from it? So I'll just give him one last chance. If he can't answer it, we'll assume that he agrees with her. Does he agree with his Rural Affairs Minister that if the prairies want to pause on the carbon tax pain, they have to elect more Liberals? Yes or no?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
No, Mr. Speaker, because people in the prairies who heat with home heating oil already are benefiting from a pause on the price of carbon, on the carbon price. That's because, Mr. Speaker, this pause that we put in applies right across the country. So the tens of thousands of Canadians in rural Canada, in the prairies, are going to be able to benefit from the transition to heat pumps. That is why, Mr. Speaker, we're going to continue to step up, including in doubling the rural top-up on the carbon price rebate. We will continue to deliver for Canadians right across the country, and we will continue to be there for all Canadians, including women.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister only divides to distract. That's all he ever does when he gets into trouble. He divides people along every possible battle line. He did that with the carbon tax carve-out for only some in a region where his support is plummeting and his caucus is revolting. And for 10 days, he refused to condemn the comments of his own Liberal minister who said this policy was applying based on how people voted. And now he signs on with the separatists to divide Canadians again. Will he, instead of dividing Canadians, reverse the policies that are driving them to the food bank?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we see the Conservatives' approach to partisan politics and to personal attacks. The reality is, when we stood with the 80 to 90% of Canadians who chose to get vaccinated, they called us divisive. When we chose to stand with women across this country who want to control their own bodies, they called us divisive. When we stand with
I thank the Honourable Whip for Opposition Leader Whip for helping out to get some more, and I ask all members, please, to exercise restraint so that we can hear the next question. The Honourable Member from Burnaby South.
People are struggling to find a home they can afford. And this federal government has the power, the land, and the resources to end the housing crisis. On one side, we've got the corporate-controlled conservatives that want to sell off our public land to their rich investor friends that helps no one. But on the other side, we've got liberals who are openly admitting that their plan is to use public lands to build luxury homes. How can this Prime Minister justify using public lands to build homes that people can't afford?
Here, here. The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, that's simply not true. We know Canadians are worried about paying their rent, finding an apartment, or buying a home. That's why we're working on affordable housing and housing affordability right across the country. It's why we put forward the Affordable Housing and Groceries Act, which helps build more affordable apartments by cutting the GST on construction. Housing advocates and developers have described this move as a game changer that will get more affordable housing built. It's why it's essential that all members work with us to move these important measures forward.
The Honourable Member from Edmonton Strathcona.
Every single Canadian deserves to have health care when they need it. Public, universally accessible health care. But the Conservative leader, Danielle Smith, just got caught trying to make health care more chaotic and more bureaucratic. She is not hiring more health care workers, not treating health care workers with respect, and leaving the door wide open for more privatization. Sound familiar? This is right out of the Conservative playbook. Yes. And on the Liberals' watch. Why are the Liberal government sitting on their hands while Alberta has their health care privatized?
Hear, hear.
Colleagues, soon the chair will be issuing some reflections upon the issue that was made by several House leaders from different parties who had raised a question of the relevance of questions in terms of to the administration of government or questions which would be directed to committee chairs. That will be coming shortly, but in the meantime, I'll ask all members to make sure that they do ask questions which are relevant. I see that the Right Honourable Prime Minister is on his feet to reply, so I will allow the Right Honourable Prime Minister to respond to this question.
Mr. Speaker, it is a relevant question because we have taken actions in the past to draw back transfers and claw back transfers to provinces that haven't been obeying the Canada Health Act, and we will continue to do that. So let me be clear, we will always defend Canada's access to health care and won't hesitate to use all available tools under the Canada Health Act to protect this right. We expect all provinces and territories to adhere to the Act when they make decisions regarding Canadians' access to health care. The Minister of Health will be closely reviewing the details of the Alberta Premier's plan, but we remain unequivocal when it comes to access to our healthcare system and access to pension supports. We will always stand with Canadians.
The Honourable Member from Aurora Oak Ridges, Richmond Hill.
Mr. Speaker, the planet is burning, and 72% of Canadians are worried about climate change. Sadly, the Leader of the Opposition does not appear to be one of them. He stated that he will do nothing to reduce our emissions nor work with the global community within the Paris Accord to protect our future. In fact, just like Donald Trump, the Leader of the Opposition will take Canada out of the Paris Accord. The federal government is committed to net zero and has invested over $120 billion in a greener future. Will the government stand for future generations, unlike the reckless Conservatives with their...
Fortunately, the Speaker was able to hear the question. The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, I want to thank the MP for Aurora Oak Ridges, Richmond Hill for her great questions on this important file. It is shameful that the Conservative leader has no plan to address a crisis facing all of humanity. His emphasis on technology to fight climate change means nothing because he is somebody who has been opposing the development of offshore wind technology in Atlantic Canada. While our government has a serious plan that addresses affordability and the climate crisis, that leader has no plan and no vision. Perhaps he should put his glasses back on.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, with or without glasses, I will not lose $54 million on an app that doesn't work. Now, this is a Prime Minister whose government is now under RCMP investigation for giving out contracts to firms that did absolutely no work. Now senior members of the bureaucracy are blowing the whistle and saying his top officials lied about it before committee. Will the Prime Minister personally cooperate with the police in this latest criminal investigation?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I can't help but wondering how many millions of dollars Canadians would have lost if they had followed the Leader of the Opposition's advice and bought Bitcoin so they could opt out of inflation. Mr. Speaker, when it comes to serious matters, both the RCMP and CBSA's Professional Integrity Division are investigating. The CBSA has also launched an internal audit to look into contracting at the agency and has increased oversight processes when it comes to the contracting.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the former director of CBSA, our principal border authority, said that he felt incredibly threatened, those were his words, by the former president of the organization. And senior bureaucracy, members of the Prime Minister's bureaucracy, are to have lied, according to this testimony, in order to cover up this $54 million scandal. The matter is now under Auditor General and RCMP investigation. Will the Prime Minister cooperate with the police, yes or no?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, obviously the reports coming out are extremely concerning, and I know that the respective authorities will be taking this extremely seriously. We expect our professional public servants to always conduct themselves with the utmost integrity, and I'm sure that will continue to happen.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Well, the entire government only takes direction from a guy who has 2 convictions for breaking the law, Mr. Speaker. And in this case, it's not just $54 million. There's $11 million given to a two-person IT firm to do absolutely nothing. The same firm has gotten $60 million from this Liberal government since 2017 alone. The entire matter is under criminal investigation. So for a third time, will the Prime Minister personally cooperate with the police, yes or no?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
You can understand that I won't take overly seriously the accusations from an individual who was Minister of Elections when he was found to break elections law. Mr. Speaker, when we see matters of wrongdoing, we ensure that proper authorities are looking into it, and of course our government will always ensure full cooperation with investigating authorities.
Hear.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
The Prime Minister is a man of conviction. He's got 2 of them, Mr. Speaker. He nearly doubled the amount of money spent on outside consultants after promising to bring it down. When we pressured him on this, he said, I know what I'll do. I'll pay $670,000 to another consulting firm to find out how we can spend less money on consulting firms. Here's some free common sense advice, and will he take it? Why not just stop spending on juicy contracts for his friends?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, of course, we need to ensure that we're getting the best value for funds spent in the public service, and the Minister agrees and is looking into it. But Mr. Speaker, let's talk about being a person of conviction. I am convinced that we need to fight climate change. I am convinced that the only thing we can do to build a strong economy for the future is protect the environment and fight climate change while putting more money in people's pockets. These are my convictions, and I've continued to be consistent on them over the past 15 years I've been in politics. We look forward to hearing what the Leader of the Opposition believes in, because right now it sure ain't clear.
The Honourable Member for Avignon-Lamétis-Matane-Matapédia. Mr. Speaker, the Copernicus Observatory tells us that 2023 will be the hottest year on record. At the same time, the Environment Commissioner says Canada is going to miss its greenhouse gas reduction target for 2030. So here we go again. This is the 10th federal climate plan since 1990, and it's headed for a 10th failure. All talk, no action. How many forest fires, heat waves, and hurricanes will it take before the government takes concrete action to reduce our emissions? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, for 8 years, we've been doing more than any other government in history to reduce emissions. The fact is, as my colleague says, that we have to do even more. The big challenge is that instead of debating things here in the House, the best way to do more is outside of this place, but we have an opposition party that denies the reality of climate change and would prefer to do nothing, to have no plan, to not take this seriously. But unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, we're still stuck in this kind of debate over whether or not climate change is real. But on this side of the House, we know it's real and we will fight it. The Honourable Member for Avignon-Lamétis-Matane-Matapédia. Mr. Speaker, the Liberals want to fight global warming as long as it doesn't cost them any votes. And they keep giving subsidies to the oil patch and backing off on carbon pricing if that's what it takes to get votes. As a result, the federal government has never met its targets, and the current plan isn't going to change that. The Environment Commissioner has been crystal clear, saying it will soon be too late to avoid the catastrophic effects of climate change. It's time for bold action for the planet's future. What are they waiting for? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, the Liberal Party made the choice to form a government that combats climate change. We know Canadians are concerned about this, and that we needed to take concrete steps to put a price on pollution, to invest in green technologies, to make the changes necessary, and to help Canadians pay for the steps they need to take. Unfortunately, the Bloc hasn't changed its stand. All they do is criticize, but the time has come for action. Quebecers and Canadians need to unite to combat climate change, and that's not what the Bloc's doing.
L'honorable chef de l'opposition.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Recording of a top Liberal government official reveals that the $1 billion green fund the Prime Minister is running is not worth the cost or the corruption. Some extracts from that recording. It was free money, sponsorship level kind of giveaway. And I quote, since the Prime Minister learned of these allegations in March, he hasn't fired a single solitary person. This is a $1 billion slush fund. Is he worried about firing the insiders because he doesn't want them to blow the whistle on this broader Liberal scandal?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, earlier this year, ISED was made aware of allegations of mismanagement at SDTC. The Auditor General has now decided to conduct an audit of SDTC, and our government has been working closely with them on this and welcomed the decision. In addition, SDTC has agreed to enable a thorough third-party review of the allegations regarding HR management, and we're committed to ensuring organizations which receive federal funding adhere to the highest standards of governance.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Is a $1 billion taxpayer-funded slush fund that top officials now say amounts to a sponsorship scandal kind of corruption. It says they were giving away free money. This at a time when a record-smashing 2 million people are forced to food banks every month, when 9 out of 10 people can't afford homes. How could the Prime Minister have thought it appropriate to blow $1 billion when Canadians cannot afford to eat, heat, or house themselves?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, allow me to be perfectly clear. Any allegation of wrongdoing in any government department must be fully investigated. There are established processes for situations such as these, and this is precisely why the Auditor General has made the decision to conduct an audit. This is a serious situation, and we are taking it with the seriousness with which it requires. Unfortunately, the Conservatives, as usual, are looking for a way to score cheap partisan points. We are going to continue to govern responsibly.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
There's nothing cheap about losing $1 billion, Mr. Speaker. That's exactly why he's not worth the cost. He sees no problem throwing away $54 million on an ArriveCan app that didn't work and we didn't need and is now under criminal investigation. And now, 6 months after he learned of corruption, cronyism, and mismanagement in this $1 billion fund, he has kept his hand-picked cronies in the position. Mr. Speaker, if he really thinks it's serious that this $1 billion fund had so much corruption, why won't he fire the people running it?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, Canada is a country of rules and laws, and that's why we need to make sure that we are doing proper investigations and ensuring appropriate consequences for any people involved in wrongdoing. This is how a country of laws and rules functions. Unfortunately, Conservatives are still choosing to make cheap partisan points on very serious issues, and we're going to continue to take these issues seriously.
Hear, hear.
The Honourable Member from Charlottetown.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians are rightly proud of those who've worn the uniform of the Canadian Forces and defended our rights and freedoms. However, the important contributions of Indigenous veterans haven't always been properly recognized. On the occasion of Indigenous Veterans Day, I'd like to ask the Prime Minister what the government is doing to ensure that the sacrifices of these brave men and women are appropriately recognized. The Right Honourable Prime Minister. I'd like to thank the member for Charlottetown for his question and for his commitment to veterans. Although previous governments were not there for Indigenous communities were there to defend our rights and freedoms. And that's why it's so important to recognize their huge sacrifice. And that's why we're taking steps like creating a team that's dedicated to Indigenous issues. We will be recognizing their sacrifice like we did in the Netherlands earlier this year, lest we forget.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
The United Kingdom's Foreign Office has given travel advice to its citizens, which reads the following. The risk of terrorist attacks happening in Canada is very likely. End quote. Does the Prime Minister agree with the UK Foreign Office's assessment? And what is he doing to protect Canadians from such an attack?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, Canada has a robust and sophisticated process around determining levels of threats to Canadians. We elevated the level of threat back in 2012 to medium, and it stays there right now. We are continuing to make sure we're doing everything we possibly can to keep Canadians safe. We understand these are trying times around the world right now, but the best thing we can do as Canadians is stay true to our values, be respectful of one another, feel each other's pain, and be there to support through very difficult times of a rise in hatred, including Islamophobia and anti-Semitism.
You're here.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Terrorists are not interested in feeling other people's pain. They're interested in causing other people pain. And the UK Foreign Office has said, and I quote, "The risk of terrorist attacks happening in Canada is very likely," end quote. Yet the Canadian government rates that risk at medium. Why the difference?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, obviously I can't speak how other countries make their determinations on travel advisories, but I can say that the work is done daily in Canada to assess the threat level to Canadians and what can be communicated to keep them safe. We elevated the threat level to medium in 2014, Mr. Speaker, and it has remained at that level since. But every single day, we reevaluate and ensure that we are doing everything we can, privately and publicly, to keep Canadians safe.
Thank you.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
And yet, if you simply read the UK Foreign Department's assessment of Canada, and I quote, "The risk of terrorist attacks happening in Canada is very likely," end quote, then there is a very serious risk, Mr. Speaker. Why did Canadians have to learn from a foreign government about an increasing threat of terrorism in Canada?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, once again, I can't speak to how the UK makes its determinations, but I certainly can say that in Canada we have top security agencies and officials who work daily to reassess the threat levels to Canadians. They are working every single day to keep Canadians safe, and will continue to keep Canadians informed on the best ways to keep safe, Mr. Speaker.
Here.
The Honourable Member from Davenport.
Mr. Speaker, the residents of my riding of Davenport are proud of Canada's unwavering support for Ukraine and our proposed modernized Canada-Ukraine Free Trade Agreement, also known as CUFTA. It's become increasingly clear, though, that the Conservative caucus doesn't support CUFTA, criticizing it in committee, and the opposition leader had no shame in filibustering CUFTA in this House. While the Conservative leader would gladly let Ukraine down, can the Prime Minister tell this House why this trade legislation is so important?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, I want to thank the MP for Davenport for her advocacy on this file and her steadfast hard work. We have been solid in our support of Ukraine since day one, and we will be there to help them rebuild when they win. We've committed over $9.5 billion in financial, military, and humanitarian aid, and the modernization of our trade deal with Ukraine is another important area of cooperation between our two countries and will be crucial to rebuild Ukraine. On this side of the House, Mr. Speaker, our support for Ukraine has been unwavering. Unfortunately, the leader of the Conservative Party cannot say the same.
The Honourable Member from Timmins James Bay.
The planet is on fire. So what is the difference between the Conservative leader's approach and the Prime Minister's? Well, the Conservative leader is a climate denier, and he would pull us out of the Paris Accord, whereas the Prime Minister is simply a denier of his global obligations, which is why we're not going to meet our 2030 targets. And the United Nations is pointing out that under this Prime Minister, Canada is planning a massive increase of oil and gas production. No wonder we are the worst country in the G7 for tackling emissions. So enough of the denial of facts. Where is that emissions cap?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I know the honourable member to be a staunch advocate for the environment and a strong defender of more action against climate change, which is why I know it must have been extraordinarily difficult for him the other day to vote with the Conservatives against the most effective measure Canada has ever used to fight against climate change. Mr. Speaker, on this side of the House, we will continue to step up in the fight against climate change every single day while putting more money in the pockets of Canadians right across the country.
L'honorable député de Richmond.
The honourable member for Richmond, Arthabaska. Mr. Speaker, for weeks now, I've been asking questions about the Governor-General's outrageous spending. Every time I get answers from ministers who feign offence and criticize reluctantly, but do nothing to change the ingrained culture of this institution. Meanwhile, GGs come and go, but the extravagant spending on meals, booze, luxury hotels, travel, and dry cleaning marches merrily along. So I ask the Prime Minister today, does his government intend to cut her $33 million budget? Because clearly, she doesn't seem to be able to manage taxpayers' money carefully and responsibly. The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, the Governor-General, Mary Simon, is an upstanding, humane, caring person, and she plays an important role in our society and democracy. We will continue to see to it that her spending is managed appropriately, but the fact is she has a very important role for the stability and future of our democracy.
Unfortunately, this concludes question period. I ask everyone to please quietly leave the House. And I see that many wish to make points of order. The Honourable Member for Edmonton Strathcona.
If you seek it, you'll find unanimous consent from the House. Mr. Speaker, we need a ceasefire in Gaza, and we also need all hostages returned.
I'm afraid I hear that there is no unanimous consent from several voices in this House. I now recognize the Honourable Member from Mount Royal, rising on a point of order.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, there have been discussions amongst the parties, and if you seek it, I think you will find unanimous consent to adopt the following motion. That the House unequivocally rejects and condemns the heinous terrorist attacks against Israel by terrorist organization Hamas on October 7, 2023, and demands that Hamas unconditionally and immediately release all hostages, regardless of nationality, that it kidnapped during its attacks.
All those opposed to the honourable members moving the motion will please say nay. Agreed. The House has heard the terms of the motion. All those opposed to the motion will please say nay. Carried. I also see that the member from Pierrefonds-Dollard is rising on a point of order.
Speaker, there have been discussions amongst the parties, and if you seek it, I believe you will find unanimous consent to adopt the following motion. That the House immediately and unequivocally demands unimpeded humanitarian aid be allowed into Gaza, and in particular, food, fuel, and water. That every measure be taken to protect civilian life in Gaza. That all foreign nationals be allowed to immediately leave Gaza, including Canadians and their families. And that the House reiterate its firm and unwavering commitment to a two-state solution with a viable Palestinian state living side by side in peace and security with Israel.
All those opposed to the honourable member moving the motion will please say nay. Agreed. This House has heard the terms of the motion. All those opposed to the motion will please say nay. Carried. Christopher.
It being 3:30, pursuant to order made on Tuesday, October 31st, 2023, the House now proceed to the taking of the deferred recorded division on the amendment of Mr. Brock to the motion to concurrence in the 6th report of the Standing Committee on International Trade. Call in the members.